I always thought betrayal, real betrayal, would come from a stranger. A coworker, maybe. A friend who didn't really mean it when they said they'd always be there. But not like this. Not from the living room of the house I grew up in, where family portraits still hung in their perfect rows and the leather couch still smelled faintly of lemon polish from my mother's weekend rituals. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in Phoenix. The kind where the sun sticks to your skin and the wind doesn't cool anything, it just shifts the dust around. I got a text from my father early that morning, family dinner. Home by 5. Don't be late, no emoji, no context. But that wasn't unusual. My family didn't do warm, they did appearances. Concern was measured by GPAs, salary brackets, and award plaques. I arrived at 4:58 p.m. I remember because I sat in my car for 2 full minutes before stepping out trying to calm my breath. The house looked the same. Beige stucco, red-tiled roof, perfectly trimmed lawn. But inside it was off. Too quiet. No smell of my mom's meat sauce, no music from Dad's dusty jazz collection. Just Brent Savannah and my father sitting stiffly on the sofa like a tribunal. My mother was in the armchair, farthest from the door, hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast. No one stood to greet me. No one smiled. No one said, "Hi, honey." Brent spoke first. "You're late." "Traffic," I replied, still halfway forcing a smile. Savannah crossed her legs like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine. Her hair curled just right, lipstick flawless. She looked beautiful, untouchable. But her eyes were ice. Dad motioned toward the lone armchair across from them. "Sit down. We need to talk." I sat upright, hands in my lap, trying not to fidget. My heart thudded so loud, I swore they could hear it. Brent didn't waste time. "You've been taking money from Mom and Dad's retirement account." I blinked. "What?" He slid a printed bank statement across the glass coffee table. A single transaction circled in red. That wasn't me. "Don't lie," Savannah cut in. "You've also been seeing Dr. Andrew, you know, the one who's married, and my fiancé told me everything." "You came onto him too." I froze. "You think I would ever—" "Enough." My father snapped, voice low but final. "We've had a long discussion, and the truth is, we don't recognize who you are anymore." My mother didn't look up. Not once. "We've removed you from the family trust," Dad continued, "and we think it's best you leave tonight." I looked around the room, the same room where I used to read next to the fireplace, where I opened birthday gifts, where we watched home movies. Now it felt sterile, corporate, like a place that no longer welcomed me. "You have 1 hour," Brent said. "We already packed a bag for you," Savannah added sweetly. "It's by the door." I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking past my mother without a hug or past Savannah's smug little smirk. But I do remember the garage. My father was by the trash bin tossing something in. "What's that?" I asked. He turned, barely shrugging. "Figured you wouldn't need this where you're going." I looked inside. It was my childhood photo album. The one with the hand-sewn cover and all the pictures from my first science fair, my 8th grade graduation, my prom dress fittings. He'd just tossed it. I picked it up, not out of sentiment, but because something in me knew if I didn't take it now, they'd rewrite even my memories. I got in my car and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. Phoenix at night isn't romantic. It's dry and yellow-lit and quietly cruel. I ended up at a cheap motel off Van Buren. One of those places with buzzing fluorescent lights and curtains that never quite close. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that photo album like it could hold me back. Inside my duffel bag, a couple changes of clothes. My laptop, a toothbrush, and a gnawing ache in my lower stomach that I hadn't fully noticed until now. I didn't cry. Not yet. I leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. That's when the memory came. Junior year. College. Brent had begged me to explain the gene splicing portion of our group project. I spent hours tutoring him. The next day, he stood in front of our class and delivered my entire section, word for word. Didn't even change the phrasing. The professor called it visionary leadership. My dad printed out the email and framed it. Mom said, "Looks like your brother is finally stepping up." And me, I just stood there in the kitchen watching them clap for someone speaking with my voice. I reached into my bag and pulled out an old black notebook, opened to a blank page. Under the motel's tired yellow light, I didn't write poetry. I didn't write pain. I started cataloging. Emails, research outlines. The early drafts of the thesis Brent had passed off as his own. Lab notes, meeting summaries. Every single receipt of erasure. Because if they were going to erase me, I'd leave behind something they couldn't ignore. No one messaged me that night. No one called. No one asked where I went. But I felt something settle in my chest, calm, not rage. They didn't just throw me out. They handed me a blank page. And I decided I was going to write something they couldn't delete. The room smelled like bleach and broken promises. It was the kind of motel that people passed without noticing. A square beige building pressed up against the street like it was ashamed of existing. The curtains didn't quite close, the lock on the door needed coaxing, and the air conditioner moaned like it had something to confess. I didn't sleep that first night. I just sat on the edge of the bed, legs, hanging hands, still clutching the old photo album I pulled from my father's trash bin. My mind was a blur of voices. Brent's accusations, Savannah's lies, my father's final verdict, echoing like a judge slamming a gavel. You're no longer part of this family. But beneath all that noise, something else stirred. A low throb in my lower abdomen. Not pain exactly. Just wait. I'd been late. 2 weeks now, maybe more. I hadn't tracked it, not with everything else going on, lab deadlines. Brent stealing my work again, Savannah's endless engagement parties, my parents' demands for updates I no longer wanted to give. I'd been dizzy a few mornings, but chalked it up to exhaustion. Nausea. I thought it was anxiety. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked down at myself, at the body they had thrown out like rotted food. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel hollow. I felt crowded. I grabbed my purse, shoved on a hoodie, and walked 2 blocks under the humming orange streetlights to the gas station on the corner. The clerk didn't make eye contact as I dropped the test on the counter. He scanned it without a word. I handed him crumpled bills and left without a receipt. Back in the motel bathroom under the sickly yellow glow, I ripped open the box with shaking hands. I didn't pray. I didn't plead. I just waited. 2 lines. Not faint. Not maybe. Definite. Sharp. Clear. Positive. I sat back on the cold tile floor, knees pulled up to my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I whispered. You're the only thing they can't rewrite. My voice barely made it out. But something heard it. Something inside me answered with silence so full it felt like music. Then I remembered the silver bracelet. Grandma's. Savannah had seen me wear it once, just once, when I was 17, and borrowing it for my school banquet. Grandma had slipped it on my wrist, smiled and said, "Because you see people for who they are not, who they pretend to be." The next day, Savannah told everyone in front of Grandma that it should have been hers, that she was prettier, more photogenic. Grandma didn't argue. She just walked away. But the bracelet disappeared 2 days later. Savannah wore it to a gala 6 months later and claimed it was hers, just like she claimed my words, just like Brent claimed my research. Just like they all claimed I was never enough. They never really loved me. They loved using me. I stood slowly, bracing myself against the counter. The test was still on the sink. I didn't throw it out. I left it there, proof witness, heartbeat. In the drawer under my duffel, I found my old leather-bound journal. I hadn't opened it in a year. But now, I flipped past sketches, notes, chemical pathways, entries written late into the night, when I still believed someone in that house wanted to understand me. I started a new page. Entry Motel Van Buren RD, 2:47 a.m. Pregnant. I paused, then wrote, not alone, not erased, not gone. After that, I made a list. Splice marker notes, recovered from backup, early drafts of hormone response study, emails with Dr. Tate, proof Brent didn't write the NIH proposal, Savannah's quote from the Phoenix Women's Gala, lifted word for word from my thesis, abstract. Grandma's ring, hidden in a hollow book, still safe. I wasn't planning revenge. I was taking inventory. Then my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. Thought it was Brent or Savannah playing one last game. But the preview froze me. Eli Chambers, I'm coming to Phoenix. If it's true, you're not alone. I stared at it. I hadn't told him. Not yet. We hadn't spoken in months. Things had ended not badly, just unfinished. He left town for a job in Boston, and I stayed back because of research deadlines and pride, always pride. But now, I texted back one word, okay, and then I waited. The next evening he showed up. Not with flowers, not with drama, just a soft knock on the motel door and that familiar voice saying, "It's me." I opened the door. He looked the same but older, softer in the eyes, more real. He didn't rush in. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there, letting me decide. I stepped back. He walked in and sat in the cracked vinyl chair near the table. I sat back on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was protective. "I'm pregnant," I said. His face didn't change. Not in panic, not in pity. He just reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a pen, grabbed a napkin from the table, and wrote one word. "Together." He slid it to me across the table. I stared at it like it was written in a language I hadn't heard in years. We didn't kiss, we didn't cry. But when I finally lay down on the bed that night, he took the chair and stayed there. Just watching. Just breathing. When I woke the next morning, the room still smelled like bleach, but not just bleach. It smelled like coffee. There was a note on the counter, "Don't leave without breakfast, E." There was toast, eggs, a paper plate, and a folded napkin. It wasn't love the way movies show it. But it was something better. It was proof. That family can be chosen. And sometimes the ones who stay say more in silence than anyone screaming, "I love you" ever could. I sat by the window, warm light spilling across the floor. My hand rested on my stomach. I still didn't feel anything move, but I felt something shift in me. The motel walls hadn't changed, but I had. The knock that came later that morning wasn't from Eli. It wasn't even from anyone I knew. It was the motel manager sliding a thin envelope under my door. I picked it up. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a job listing. Lab assistant, part-time, flexible hours, handwritten across the top in familiar scrawl. "Just in case you're ready." I didn't know who sent it, but I knew what I had to do next. There's a kind of rage that doesn't scream. It doesn't flip tables, doesn't shatter glass. It simmers low, quiet, methodical. The kind of rage that opens a laptop at 6:03 a.m. and doesn't close it until dusk. The kind that files documents with timestamps, highlights inconsistencies in old emails, and builds a case brick by brick because some wars are not fought with fire but with folders. That's where I was. Weeks after the motel, after the pregnancy test, after Eli's note that said, "Don't leave without breakfast," I found myself in a dusty corner of the Phoenix Public Library. The far table by the window. No outlets nearby, but it had natural light and, more importantly, silence. I was 6 weeks pregnant, newly registered under the name Phoenix Biotech LLC, and absolutely done being erased. It started with a headline. I hadn't been looking for them. I wasn't stalking their profiles. I had turned off every notification, deleted every contact that had Mom, Dad, Home, or Whitmore in the name. But someone forwarded me the article. Savannah Sloan launches Women's Health Initiative backed by federal funding. The photo made my stomach clench harder than morning nausea ever could. Savannah smiling on stage, one hand on her heart, the other gesturing proudly beside a banner that read, Savannah Sloan Foundation, empowering women through science. I didn't need to read the rest. I recognized the words in the mission statement. Word for word, they were mine. Taken from a line in my graduate research proposal filed 3 years ago. The one Brent had conveniently helped edit before submitting it to the department. The same Brent who now stood beside her, in the photo all buttoned up and smug. I clicked through to the grant application available for public record. Brent was listed as Director of Research. Savannah as founder and visionary. No mention of me, not even in the fine print. They hadn't just stolen the science. They had monetized it, packaged it, rebranded it, removed my name, then sold my soul as their innovation. I didn't throw my laptop. I didn't yell. I closed the tab, took a slow breath, and whispered to my belly, they think they won. But they forgot whose hands built this. That night, I filed for the final legal formation of Phoenix Biotech, named not just for the city I lived in, but for what I was becoming, something that rises from ash. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a quiet storm. I reopened every old file, every thesis draft, every email between me and Dr. Tate from the university. The messages where I brainstormed hormone pattern mapping for underserved clinics. The lab notes Brent used without attribution. I printed them all, highlighted them, dated them. I even pulled out the old notebook with Grandma's handwriting on the back page. They won't see you now. But one day, they'll remember who they buried. I began logging witnesses, friends from the research group, a former lab assistant. Even Dr. Tate, who agreed off the record that the voice in that research had always been mine. Eli was there through all of it, not hovering, not pushing. He made coffee, brought snacks, picked up my prescriptions. Sometimes just sat on the floor beside me and read quietly. One night, I looked up from a pile of documents and asked, "Why are you still here?" He didn't look away from his book, because no one ever stayed when you needed them most. Then he added, "I'm not them. That was enough." Weeks later, I stood in front of a mirror in the co-working space in Tempe, smoothing down a navy blue dress that still fit barely around the small curve of my belly. I wasn't trying to hide it. I wasn't trying to lead with it either. I just needed to show up. It was a small startup showcase. Mostly local founders, a few angel investors, and the usual mentor crowd looking for promising ideas to groom or to claim. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage and took a breath. My name is Avery Whitmore, and I'm the founder of Phoenix Biotech. We're building accessible, low-cost hormone detection kits designed for rural women's clinics, specifically for early identification of reproductive risk markers that often go undiagnosed until it's too late. Slide after slide, I spoke clearly. Data case use pilot plan, market potential, and projected cost analysis. I saw nods. I saw 2 people taking notes. And I saw one man, older gray-haired advisor badge around his neck, lean back and smirk. When I finished, he tilted his head and said, "Impressive pitch. But we've already had our fill of pregnant founders trying to prove a point." There was a pause. No one laughed, but no one defended me either. I looked at him, then simply said, "Thank you for your feedback." I clicked the remote, ended the presentation, and walked off stage. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I walked right past the coffee table, past the bottled waters, and out the door into the Arizona sun. Eli was waiting near the parking lot. He didn't say anything, just looked at me and raised his phone. "You got the whole thing I asked?" He nodded. We went home. That night, he uploaded the video to a small forum for women-led ventures. No hashtags, no sob story, just the title, Science Before PR. A startup built from what they tried to erase. It took off. Within 24 hours, the clip had been shared over 18,000 times. Messages started flooding in, from founders, scientists, former colleagues. Even a woman who had been through the exact same grant theft by a sibling. But one message stopped me. A direct email. Subject line, seed funding inquiry. From a woman named Dana. No company name listed. The message read, "Your clarity is unforgettable. I'd rather fund truth than PR. It's not much, but it's clean. $25,000. Unrestricted. Let me know if you'll accept." I stared at the screen, not from disbelief, but from recognition. She didn't ask for a story. She saw the science. I accepted. And as I signed the funding agreement that night, belly pressing lightly against the table edge, I thought, they took the credit. They took the money. They even tried to take the name. But they can't replicate the soul of what I built, and they never will. I knew they'd try something eventually. Savannah had too much to lose and too little soul to stop herself. So when the cease and desist letter arrived, official letterhead threatening language, legal fire, and fury, I didn't flinch. They wanted me to take down the pitch video, to retract my name, to stop talking. I didn't respond right away. I simply opened a folder titled Proof. Then I opened another Originals, Pre-Submission, and I called Jacqueline Morales. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Too bright, too sterile. A place designed not for emotion, but for order. The walls didn't echo, but every shuffle of paper, every click of a heel felt amplified. I arrived early, sat beside Jacqueline, my attorney. Her voice was calm, low, precise, like the kind of storm that doesn't announce itself until it's already overhead. Savannah walked in 20 minutes late in cream-colored heels and a matching sheath dress that screamed public relations strategy. Her hair was perfect. Her face was matte, immovable. She carried herself like the star of a daytime special about misunderstood sisters. Brent followed. No tie. Sunglasses clipped to his shirt collar. He didn't look at me. Not once. Behind them, my parents, Frank and Marlene Whitmore. My mother's lips were drawn tight. My father looked everywhere except my direction. I wasn't here to be seen by them. I was here to be heard. The proceedings began with Savannah's team painting the picture of a tragic family rift. Avery had always been difficult, they said. The fallout was a series of misunderstandings. The video was defamatory. Savannah's foundation, they argued, had been built on shared family vision. Jacqueline waited. Then she stood, and she said the words I had waited years to hear on my behalf. This isn't family drama. This is organized appropriation of federal research. She began submitting evidence. Quietly, cleanly. Exhibit A. The NI grant proposal. Initial version submitted by Avery Whitmore. Date stamped 3 years prior to the Savannah Sloan Foundation's creation. Exhibit B. The research drafts with margin notes in my handwriting. Exhibit C. Emails between me and our university advisor, discussing hormonal detection methods weeks before Brent submitted them under his own name. And then the recording. I hadn't known the old vent in my bedroom carried sound, but it did. I had cleaned that audio file for months. I had listened to it 100 times, and now it played in the courtroom for all to hear. Savannah's voice clear as crystal. She'll fight back eventually. My mother then will cut her off. Legally, publicly, let her disappear. Distant laughter. Then Regina. She's too stubborn to control. That's always been her flaw. There was silence when the audio ended, a kind that didn't wait to be explained. The judge, an older woman with silver curls pinned tight, folded her hands. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut like wind over stone. "I am granting a temporary injunction," she said. Savannah Sloan is barred from using or benefiting financially from any intellectual property, research, branding, or presentation materials directly or indirectly linked to Phoenix Biotech or the graduate works of Dr. Avery Whitmore. No gasp, no drama, just truth. And the kind of silence that follows when power shifts. Savannah stood frozen. Brent leaned back like someone who just realized the exit was too far away. My mother looked at the floor. My father closed his eyes. I didn't speak. Not yet. As we exited the courtroom, reporters rushed the hallway. Cameras flashed. Microphones lunged forward. Someone called out, "Dr. Whitmore, anything you'd like to say to your family?" I paused. Then I said, "I already did in court." We walked past them, Jacqueline at my side, Ely a few paces behind. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew what I left behind. Later that night, I sat alone in the lab I'd been renting for months, modest, windowless, humming with quiet machines. I leaned over the microscope, checking cell growth. Precise. Methodical. Unbothered. In the corner of the room, tucked under my coat, were two small blankets, blue and yellow. I'd brought them from Eli's place that morning. My twins had fallen asleep on the couch beside the incubator table. Their presence grounded me more than the ruling ever could. My phone buzzed once. An email. No subject. From my father. Only one sentence. "Zinni's gone. It's just us now." Not an apology, not a question. Just a sentence thrown into the void, waiting for an answer that wouldn't come. I closed the message, locked the screen, then turned back to the culture tray. With gloved hands, I picked up the pipette, measured exactly what I needed. Dropped the solution. This was my real answer. Not words. Work. The work they said I couldn't lead. The science they thought they could rebrand. The legacy they thought they could steal, watermark, and wear. They were wrong. Some wounds don't need closure. They need clarity and consequences. There was dirt under my fingernails, sunlight in my eyes, and the sound of my daughter humming off-key as she patted soil around a citrus tree no taller than her. Leona wore a mismatched pair of boots, a floral sun hat 3 sizes too big, and a grin so wide it made her nose wrinkle. Her twin brother Leo stood nearby holding a small plastic watering can with the seriousness of a scientist conducting an experiment. They took turns pressing down the earth with tiny palms, both whispering something to the roots, as if they believed the trees could hear them. Maybe they could. It had been 1 year since the courtroom. 1 year since the injunction was granted, since the cameras flashed and Savannah stood frozen while I walked out without a backward glance. 1 year since Phoenix Biotech had become more than a file folder on my laptop. It had become something real, tangible. Alive. Now we lived in a modest stucco house in Tempe, just big enough for the 4 of us. There was a makeshift lab in the back, converted from a detached garage, where I spent early mornings before school drop-offs and long nights after bedtime. But today was for planting something that couldn't be stolen. "One's a lemon and one's an orange," Leona announced proudly. "That one's Leo's tree. This one's mine." "I didn't agree to that," Leo said quietly, still watering. "You nodded," she countered. "Did not. Did too." I smiled. Let them argue about trees. Let them plant roots before they even knew what it meant to be uprooted. Eli walked out from the back patio with a pitcher of lemonade and 2 glasses. He caught my eye and offered a quiet nod, not a question. Just presence. That had always been his gift. Never demanding space, just making room when I needed it. The box arrived later that afternoon. Plain, brown, no return address. I opened it slowly, cautious from habit more than fear. Inside was a single photograph, tucked between layers of cardboard. I froze. It was the photo. The family portrait from my 9th birthday. Me in a blue dress my grandmother had sewn by hand. I remembered hating the ruffles, but loving how she had whispered, "You look exactly like someone meant to be remembered." Years ago, after the split, after the trust was rewritten and my name was scrubbed from every frame, I had seen this photo again, only cropped. My face was missing. All that remained was a sliver of my arm, as if even my shadow had been too much for them. But this was the original. I turned it over. In neat cursive, someone had written, "This is the version that matters, see?" I knew that handwriting. I walked inside, holding the photo like something sacred. Eli stood in the kitchen, drying his hands. You found this? I asked. He paused, then nodded. My mom kept albums. She used to be close with your aunt. Regina, I think. I nodded, jaw tightening. She sent it to her. A few months ago, he continued. I guess Regina didn't delete everything. I looked at the picture again. I was smiling in it awkwardly, a little off-center, but smiling. For a moment, something sharp tugged at the edge of my chest. A memory, maybe, or a warning. I don't want to hang it up, I said. You don't have to. I just want to know it exists. That it did happen. That I was there. You were, Eli said softly, and no one gets to erase that. I didn't cry. I took the photo, placed it gently in a small wooden box on my desk, and closed the lid. Then I went back to work. My research had shifted in the last year. I'd begun developing a protein-based compound targeting early ovarian cancer markers. It wasn't theoretical anymore. It was personal. My mother had been diagnosed too late. By the time I knew, the silence between us had stretched too wide to cross. She never responded to my messages, not even the one I sent after her surgery. But I still did the work. Not for forgiveness, not for legacy. For every woman who didn't get to speak up. For every daughter who deserved to be heard. Weeks later, I received an invitation to speak at a regional medical conference in Flagstaff. I declined. I didn't need to stand on stages anymore. I had already done that and more. Instead, I submitted our clinical data package to the committee for review, and they cited it. Phoenix Biotech's hormone tracking algorithm was now referenced in 2 independent presentations, one by a public health researcher from New Mexico, another by a Native women's health advocacy group. Neither mentioned Savannah, or Brent, or the Whitmore name. But in the footnotes, there it was. Data provided by Phoenix Biotech-led researcher Dr. Avery Whitmore. I wasn't in the room, but my work was. And so were Eli and the twins, seated quietly in the back, listening as someone else explained what I had built. Not to a crowd, not for applause, but for purpose. On the drive home, Leona fell asleep holding a brochure she had colored with crayons. Leo stared out the window, humming the same melody I heard when he watered the tree. Eli reached for my hand as we pulled into the driveway. I'm proud of you, he said. I didn't say thank you, I just smiled. That evening, we watered the grove. Leona poured too much. Leo scolded her. Eli handed me the pitcher, and I knelt beside them both, letting the soil soak in every drop. As the sun dipped behind the roofline, I stood back and looked at what we'd made. 2 trees, 2 lives, 1 garden we planted ourselves, no inheritance, no permission, no borrowed name. Eli turned to me. Are you okay now? I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my hands, calloused and stained from lab work, from parenting, from planting. Then I looked at the yard, where tiny leaves shivered in the golden light. Where Leona's boot had left a print in the wet soil. Where Leo had placed a rock beside his tree to guard it. And I said, I'm not just okay. I'm exactly who I was meant to be. They tried to unwrite me. They tried to cut me out of their story. But I built something real, rooted, growing, too alive to be denied, and no frame will ever be wide enough to contain that. Avery Whitmore's story is more than a courtroom victory or a startup success. It's a quiet, deeply personal journey of reclaiming identity. When her family erased her name, her value, and her voice, she didn't try to scream louder. She chose to build something they couldn't erase. Phoenix Biotech wasn't just a company. It was a response. A living testament that what she created had weight, had merit, and would outlast every false narrative they told about her. Her revenge wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. What stays with me is the way she moved forward. No spectacle, no begging for acknowledgement, just purpose, just action, just clarity. She didn't go back to be accepted. She moved on to be fulfilled. The most powerful message here is this. You don't need to be invited back to the table that broke you. You can build your own stronger, steadier, and real. If you've ever been cast aside, underestimated, or forced to start over, remember your name is still yours. Your truth still matters. And your strength doesn't need to be loud to be unforgettable. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey, I encourage you to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that highlight the power of quiet transformation, resilience, and earned redemption. Sometimes the best response isn't to fight harder, it's to rise higher, and to let what you build speak for itself.